So yeah, a lot of cool hats coming. We'll have to send you some.
Yeah, I will wear them. I will promote it for you. I dig it. That's uh one of the one thing that because I always wear hats in all my videos, and I have yours. I do. I like the effing gear hats. You know which ones I'm talking about? They have plausible deniability because
Oh yeah, effing gear.
they're they have.
Oh geez. Yeah,
I'm like, no, it's a bird. It's a golf hat.
right,
Uh,
right. It's not what it
and
looks like.
then I have mine. These are mine.
Yeah, those are
Luck
cool.
11, but I just started those, so we're still working on getting it dialed in. Um, so you ready? You want to get started?
Yeah, yeah. Let's talk.
All right. So today, welcome to the Paul Steele podcast. I have a special guest whose story is all about faith, boldness, and building something bigger than just a brand. Will Schmitt is the founder of Our True God, a faith-driven apparel company that is more than hats and shirts. It's a statement, a declaration, and a movement. What I love about Will is he didn't just start this to sell clothes. He started as a way to put God's name where it belongs, front and center in the culture. We're going to dive into his journey of faith, the battles he's faced, the victories that only God could make possible, and what it really takes to really live out your beliefs out loud in business and in life. So stick around. This is going to be a powerful conversation with the one and only Will Schmitt of Our True God. Man, welcome.
Appreciate the intro. I don't know if I'm one and only, but I'm because I mean my dad's also Will Schmidt, my son's Will Schmidt, so there's several.
If it makes you feel any better, I'm like the fourth Paul in our family, and everybody still refers to me as Little Paul, and I'm bigger than
Exactly.
all of them.
That's hilarious. Yeah, it's funny.
Um,
They say
so
name. There's a lot of power in the name, right?
yeah, it came from a good place. Um, so tell me, what was the moment that you decided to start Our True God? Was it, a vision? Was it a result of uh, prayer? Was it a breaking point in life? You want to do something different? How did this come about?
Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, it's kind of all those things to some degree. We, obviously, all of us experienced that little thing that happened in 2020 with COVID, and it was a time in my life that was kind of dark, and we were scared. We were on, we didn't really know what was going on, and at the time, I had been working in corporate America for a long time, and um, I started with Budweiser and did worked with them for 10 years. And it was a lot of fun. The people, amazing people in that company, but my faith and my work were really separate. There was no crossover, and that did start to concern me at a certain point. I started having internal conflict with that, especially as our society started changing, around 2016, 2017, the things like, woke and some of these things that
Right.
started to permeate company cultures. And so I had a little bit of conflict with that. And I couldn't put my finger on what it was. I just knew I needed to change. So at that point, I left Budweiser and I went and did consulting with Ernst and Young, and another freaking amazing company and a lot of fun. We got to work with a lot of the best companies around the world, and see the insides of them. And once again, but it switched my role from strictly just problem solver to servant, because you're there trying to help them figure it out. And I got the
Right.
bug for service, at that point. I started to be able to articulate what was going on. It was like, I don't know if you've ever had that, where it's like it's internal struggle, but you're not really sure. The words fail you. You don't really know what's going on with. You just know that you're stressed and there's something not right.
Absolutely.
It's like,
I know that
you
feeling
know,
all too well.
right. So I was going through that, and it took me a minute, but we started going to this different church, which was the first step, I think, and it opened my eyes to some of the things going on in the world. And it started giving me the vocabulary and the understanding of what was going on, so I could articulate it. I could talk about, oh, hey, society looks like it's going down this rabbit hole that's probably not righteous. And we talk about, I hate how that term righteous has become a derogative thing, because righteous is like the best thing you can be.
Right.
It's right aligned to God. And our culture is like, oh, you're too righteous. It's like, if someone said that to me, I'm like, hey, thank you.
Yeah.
I appreciate that.
I'll
That's like
take
the
it.
best. That's the best compliment you can give me. Um, but so all this stuff was starting to happen. COVID hit, and I at that point it was, everyone was talking about it in the Christian space. It was like, is this end times? Like, what is this? Is it a global? Is the first thing that happened at a global level like that since really World War II. If we're being honest, right? At
Right.
that kind of a caliber. And so it was shocking. It shocked the system. It shocked everybody. I was no exception. And my brother actually he had moved into the e-commerce space and with a different company, and he had started that company. He made a huge, really successful company, but he ended up selling it. And I told him, I was like, hey man, the world is hurting right now. Like there's no they're talking about not letting people go to church. You can't even go into the building.
Right.
And God forbid, pray in public, or it was almost like you can't even see your loved one if they have COVID and they're dying. Like, you can't even go in the same building. This is we're in a dark spot. Like, we got to fight back. And that's really where it was born from. And I was like, hey, you know how to do e-commerce, and I feel like I understand a little bit better what's going on with this Christian space, and in the bigger dynamic of the world and the universe we're in. And we kind of put our brains together, and that's how OTG was formed, is to basically fight back against what felt like a suppression of Christianity, a suppression of faith that was going on in the world at the time. And we still feel it today to some degree, but we
Now,
fight back.
when you said we, is that a business partner? Who are you talking about exactly?
Yeah, my brother and I,
Okay.
we're the founders of the company. And so both on different, we both had different paths, right? And it's amazing, like, when you get into this space, as probably better than most, right? When you're in this and you're living it, and you're not afraid to wear your faith on your sleeve or on your hat, it opens a different dimension.
Yeah.
People talk to you about different things, you experience different things, you hear God in a different way. There's a lot of powerful things that happen. A lot of us are kind of living our life trying to think of how do we avoid disturbing people by talking about, it's like, what do they say at the dinner table at Thanksgiving? Don't talk about faith and politics,
You're right.
right? It's like, those are probably two of the most important things for us to talk about. It's
Right.
like, once again, the world's guidance is poor. But if you're not talking about faith, if the world makes you feel like you're not talking about faith, I think our message back is, don't worry, he has overcome the world. you know Faith is what we need to be talking about. There's a lot of people suffering, a lot of people going through things. You never know what people are going through.
When I was,
And
I don't know, uh, about 30, I guess it was 2000, 14, 15. So 35, I had a really bad car accident and I broke my back, crushed my pelvis, both my hips, both my legs, both my feet. Was in the hospital for months and months and months and months, learning how to walk again, the whole 9 yards.
wow.
And when I went through that, that was kind of the crossroads in my life where I really um, dove deep into the Bible and to my faith and trying to understand what I believed and why I believed it because I the way that I grew up, my grandfather was a pastor. My dad was a basketball coach for one of the largest private Christian universities in the country. So totally faith-based. Everything revolved around, church and athletics. And so I had those nagging questions like, would I be a Christian if, I was born in Iran?
Hmm.
You know, am I a Christian just because, do I believe what I believe because I've always believed it, or do I believe it because it's the truth?
Right.
And so, I'll never forget I had made, a bunch of social media posts um, talking about faith and God and, just trying to figure it out. And somebody either commented or sent me a message, I can't remember, but they said, "Why are you doing this to yourself? Why is it so important?" And I said, I, I don't think there's any subject that warrants more study and understanding than this one because I was faced with my own mortality at that point.
Yeah.
Because in the blink of an eye, I went from everything was normal to I can't feel my legs. And that was such a pivotal moment for me, but I had to go down, I went down all the rabbit holes, trying to not, I wouldn't say justify my faith, but I wanted to understand that my belief was in the right place. And so I read the Quran. I read, the Kebra Nagas, which was the Rastafarian Bible, because I smoked pot back then. I was like, well, if I can smoke pot and that be a part of my faith, that would be great. I read about everything. And um, you know, coming, I just did a big circle, and the more rabbit holes I went down, the truth all led back to the same place.
Yeah.
And that was something that really gave me the confidence to live my faith out loud. Uh, I'm not ashamed of my faith. I'll talk about it uh, any day of the week with anybody who wants to talk. But I'm also, um, I've lived life. I've been in recovery for years, and don't mistake that for years of perfect recovery because that's not what it was. Um, but I met so many good people through that process. Um, and now I thank God for my alcoholism. I really do because it is what has brought me closer to God in ways that I could have never imagined. But the 12 steps of AA, you know, one of the steps is coming to understand God, understand your faith and your higher power. And, to do that earnestly and honestly, it took a lot of, I say work, but it became interesting to me. The Bible was just, you know, if I'm being honest, the Bible was a paperweight on my desk for years, years and years and years. And I would dust it off on, Sunday when I went to church and read the one little paragraph that the preacher was talking about. And I never really delved into it. And then once I started reading the book, um, with eyes to see and ears to hear and a heart to understand, it blew my mind. It was
Yeah.
so crazy to me that I had the picture of the Bible that I had for so long. And when I actually read it, it was like, oh, this makes sense now, you know? But before starting the brand, has your faith changed since you've started the brand, or was it just an extension of your faith in the beginning?
I mean, I love. Thank you for sharing your story too a little bit there, and I have a lot of commonalities with your story too. And I was raised by an amazing guy and mom, but my dad in particular went through, I think, probably the first resurrection that I witnessed, and tied to alcohol and drugs, and um, that for me was the foundation. Seeing him go through the struggle allowed me to get out of the struggle faster later on,
Yeah.
and and not go as deep. I always remember he told me this story about when I was on my way back to, it was like third year college or whatever, and he told me the story of like how he almost died from um, cocaine addiction, and he spelled this thing out. I don't want to go into too much detail what he said, but it was enough to scare me. The impact to himself, the impact to others immediately, the repercussions, that I witnessed as a kid that I didn't really understand.
Right.
I didn't understand the cop car leaving the house and why that was happening. One going to the hospital, one going to the, jail. And
Yeah.
I didn't understand what was going on at all. And to find out what had happened was he almost died, and then he had a bad reaction, and then he did some bad things. And then all he could think about was do another line of coke, right?
Yeah.
Like that's where I was like, whoa, that's. And he tells me this story, and I'm horrified. And literally, it was moments, mere hours before I saw cocaine the first time in my life with some of my buddies doing it. And they said, "Well, you want to try this?" And I'm like, "No way! I'm never touching that. And by the way, I'm not touching any other drugs. I'm done with all that stuff at this point. It's
Yeah.
gone. I'm like, I just heard the worst thing you can imagine. You know, and I'm just not even going to go there. It's over." And he saved my life probably because I didn't have that type of personality that would have been able to handle that at the time.
Right. Well, it's amazing. You never know where, um, you know, uh, when it comes to recovery, I don't, Alcoholics Anonymous for years was like the secret thing. And, you don't, but, society has changed in a positive way in the sense and I'm talking specifically about recovery, that it's not as much of a stigma
Yeah,
anymore.
thankfully.
Um, and everybody, I don't care who you are, everybody has a friend, a family member, or themselves who
Mm.
have dealt with addiction. And addiction comes in every form and fashion. It's not just drugs and
Yeah,
alcohol.
it's
Some
all over the
people,
place.
it's work, it's food, it's working out, anything. And I think that's the story, in the Bible where um, Jesus talks about, it's harder for the rich man to go through the eye of a needle than to get into heaven. And what he was saying was anything that's more important to you than your faith is a stumbling block. That's a separation between me and God.
Yeah.
And so that was,
Yeah, if you're not willing to give it up, if you would let that get in the way of your relationship with God, that's like the key thing. And I love that example in
yeah,
particular because people twist that example to meet their own means. But what he's
absolutely.
saying is targeting this guy's struggle and sin. And we talk about addiction. We try to be a little more straightforward with what it is. It's harder to talk about sin, right? But when someone's addicted to something, it's typically a sin, right, of some sort.
Right.
And whether it's gluttony, whether it's lust, whatever it is. But for me, it's like if you can identify what it is and put a name to it, it's much easier to build a protection plan or an attack plan against that and pull
Yeah,
Jesus in to help. But if you don't
absolutely.
know if you're like getting stabbed in the dark and you can't see what's going on, like you're just going to keep getting stabbed. So if you shine a light on it, it's this. We do this a lot. We have a group in OTG called the Hundredfold, and we're very focused on how do you create abundance, not just wealth, but like in your family, in your community, in your relationships, in your business. And then one of the core things to think about is where am I vulnerable? You know,
Right.
where do I have cracks in the armor where sin, devil's trying to get a foothold?
Well,
And if you understand that, it's just like any strategy you can build. Oh, okay, I know this is my weakness. Here's what I need to do about it. Do I need to engage a coach? Do I need to, learn from someone who's been there? I love your example in particular because you said it's your blessing, right?
right.
And the reality of the situation is, if you never gone through that, right? Someone else struggle with it would say to you, you don't understand. You
Right.
don't know what I've gone through, and you wouldn't have as much of a leverage to help them.
Well, what God does, and using the 12 steps in recovery, the way that I look at it, and I use the same method for any challenge in my life when it comes to this particular, but you know, uh, for me, not to get too dark here, but when I was a kid, I was a victim of SA. Uh, if I say it, they're gonna. remove our podcast, so I won't say it out loud, but you know what I'm saying when I say SA, um, by an uncle. And that was something, man, that I struggled with for
Mm.
years, and it drove my addiction. Now, my addiction was my own. I don't mean to put blame on something else, but when I was actively drinking, or doing drugs, it was a a way for me to have a pity party for myself. Poor me, like you said, if you only knew what I've been through, and nobody understands, and all this, and what God has done in my life is taken this terrible thing that, there's no it had no positive weight to it at all. It was a purely negative, horrible thing. And it's moved it over here into the asset column of my life because it's something I can use to help other men who have been through the same thing. And there's such a taboo about it that guys won't talk about it. But anytime I've spoke on stage or in, any setting where there's a group of people and I talk about that subject, there's always 100% of the time there's a couple guys that will stick around and say, "Hey man, I went through the same thing, and I'd never talked about it, whatever." But now at this point in my life, um, that thing that was so negative now holds such positive weight that I wouldn't trade it. If I could go back and this never happened, I wouldn't take that deal because it's given me the opportunity to help so many men at this
Oh
point
yeah,
that it's
I
an
can imagine.
asset in my life. It's not a liability anymore. But that's what God does with anything that, um, is a stumbling block for us, or, um, any kind of struggle, using your faith to overcome that gives us the ability to relate uniquely to somebody who's going through the same thing. And that's where the value is, so
Totally.
that I think is amazing. But getting sorry, I keep getting us sidetracked.
No, it's
Um,
good. I mean, your story is powerful, man, and it's such a good testament to how God operates. And we talk about the link. Trauma is often the source of sin, right?
yeah,
It's it's almost 100% correlation, right? All of us whatever the sins we struggle with, you can trace it back to a coping mechanism towards some kind of trauma that happened to us as kids, or whatever, relationships, or girlfriends, or boy, whatever it is. And that's so powerful because now you've figured out how to, instead of keeping that hole open and coping, you let Jesus come in and heal it
yeah,
and force the devil out. And that's the thing. And I didn't, you asked, I'd probably get back to your first question here, but you're talking about, um, has my faith grown? And I mean, unbelievable amounts. I could tell you, like, starting the company, I didn't believe in the devil. Like, I was like, I don't know if it's a real devil or not. I don't know if he's really a thing. And, I don't know if you want me to tell this story, but I have pretty good proof
yeah.
at
Of
this
course, I want
point.
to hear that story. That sounds like the
But
best.
so I understand his mechanisms at this point. But and I've seen my own trauma, my own holes, and the power of closing that, or helping, letting Jesus in to close it for you. It really is how it has to happen. But what's nice about when you let Jesus in is he evicts the other guy,
Yeah,
and it's a good eviction. It's like they say, when you clean, you evict the tenant, you clean the house, and the devil tries to come back in. But if you instead let Jesus move into this new house, like, devil can't come back in,
there's no
and
room.
that's the power of that whole thing. But I think for us, so we started off, I don't know if there's a devil. So we start, it's innocently. I For me, I would describe it as, and anyone that's on the call listening, I felt it like a call, but I was not ready for what was coming.
Right.
And what's amazing about God is he doesn't call the qualified, he qualifies the called.
Exactly.
And he'll bring you in before you're ready, you know, and he'll put you through. If you ever been through like a hit training, or I almost equate it to, training for like a marathon, or training for something, he's going to put you through the ringer.
Right.
If you, one of the most dangerous prayers you can pray, and this is the prayer I prayed starting the company, was, Lord, help me figure out how to serve your kingdom. Help me figure out how to move the kingdom forward. Pull me in. It's like the Isaiah, send me, put me in, coach. That prayer is a deadly prayer. Like that, your old self's gonna die if you pray that prayer.
Yeah,
Like,
you got to be careful. I prayed
yeah,
for patience one time. I will never pray for patience
right.
again because
Here's your test. Here you go.
yeah, he
I'll
put
help.
somebody in my life that
Yeah,
tested every fiber of patience I had in my being.
right. Yeah,
So
and so
you gotta be
it's
careful.
over at that point. I mean, and that's basically what happened. Is he put us to the ringer, me in particular, and my brother too. We've both been on that path. We both were kind of, I would say, called, but I hate to use the word lukewarm because I feel like it's too cliche nowadays. Everybody kind of throws that around like they understand what that means. But I think we knew we needed to be more outwardly facing with our faith.
Right.
Didn't really know how. We were like, and it started with just putting a hat on, you know, and then going in public, and you forget it's there, but no, everybody's seeing it, and so they react to you differently. You
Yeah.
know, they expect certain things from you. It changes the dynamic of how you approach people. It starts changing you because you're not trying to hide your faith anymore. It's kind of like Jesus says. One of the things that I'm also horrified of is he says, if you're scared of me, if you are embarrassed of me, I'm embarrassed of you in front of my Father. It's like I never want to hear that. It's
Right.
just it's not
Yeah.
something I'm interested in. And so I'm like, look, I'm a Christian, and frankly, if you need to talk to somebody, come talk to me, and I'm happy to pray for you, and I'm happy to help you in any way I can. And I want everybody to know that,
Yeah.
even meeting me. And if you don't like Christians, I'd love to have a chance to change your perspective on that.
Right.
But that's just how the
So
brain started shifting. And so we do our ads, we try to advertise, we get out there. We would get attacked with like the weirdest stuff. And I have a cousin who's a senator in Missouri, and you know he gets attacked with some horrible stuff. Just the nature of politics. But this stuff that we would get attacked with was like dark. I don't know how to explain it. It was almost demonic in nature. It was the kind of stuff you'd see in horror movies. And people would be posting this on our ads. And I'm just like, what is going on? And at the time, my home address was on the business because we were small. And I'm
right.
like, oh, I have kids. I'm like, am I inviting something into my life here? What's going on here? Um, the, so basically the attacks continue, and we would get in, we would struggle with that. And we eventually were like, you know what? We need to stay focused on the mission. It's just noise. They're not, we obviously will change the address and make sure, make sure
Right.
all that stuff's protected, but let's keep going forward. And so we had moments like this where weird challenges would pop up. We actually were called onetruegod.shop at the beginning because the .com was like $8,000 and
Right.
we didn't have any money. And we're like, okay, let's make some money and then we can buy it. And, so we'll start with the .shop. So we grew, became a bigger store. And we're like, okay, we have some money. Let's go buy it. It's not for sale. And we're like, oh, what's going on with that? So we look up, and I'm not suggesting that you guys do this, but onetruegod.com was purchased by a Satan worshiper and turned into like this giant Satan something site, you know. And he was basically trying to feed off our traffic that we were sending to try to corrupt. His whole goal was like to try to corrupt Christians.
Right.
And I'm like, what are you doing, dude? Like this is your purpose in life. You think this is a good idea? It shocked me. And so I was like, okay, what are we gonna do? And once again, we get, are we supposed to quit? They're coming at us and blah blah blah. And we were like, okay, we're gonna offer to buy the site back from them. So we call, we get a broker. We talk to this guy, and he says, yeah, I want $100,000 for it. And we're like, I don't think that's going to happen. I'm not going to fund whatever it is you're doing over there.
Right.
It's like, that's not happening. So, we're like, okay, we love the OTG acronym. We feel like that's the right one. We have a great logo with the cross, and it feels like centered. And, so let's do Our True God, same acronym. So that's when it changed to ourtruegod.com. And from there, it's like every one of these moments where you get these challenges, it looks insurmountable. It looks like you're getting attacked from all sides,
Right.
but God's really just trying to help you see what you're capable of. With your ingenuity, your ability to work through problems, your ability to challenge the status quo, your ability to to connect better with Him and bring Him into the game. And honestly, every one of these moments, we brought Jesus more into the game and said, "Lord, help us figure this out. We don't know. This is horrifying. I don't want my family in jeopardy. I don't know who this dude is. That's running this site, and help protect us. Help us. Figure this out. Help hide us from the enemy. Whatever it is." And he will tell you what to do, and it's it's like shocking when you get the revelation. You're like, "Oh, we'll just do that." You know, and sometimes he because you're so stubborn, he has to part the sea and make it so obviously a miracle that if you don't walk through it, you know, it's like just you got to go through when the sea parts like that, you just got to go,
Yeah.
and or else
Uh,
you're going to get swept up by the Egyptians and everyone coming after you.
Listen, let me tell you, that happened to me today. It
Wow.
just happened today. Uh, not even a week ago, I had a very intentional prayer slash conversation with God. And I've been wanting to open up a sober living situation for people in recovery who are just coming out of treatment and so on. And today, this morning at 10 o'clock, I went and met a guy who I've known for years. Um, and he bought a 14 bedroom place that used to be a recovery center. And his idea was to do something recovery based. Wasn't sure how to do it. And I went to look at this thing just as a possible rental. I had no idea that this place has four kitchens, um, again, 14 bedrooms. It's set up for exactly that. And it's so much bigger than my wildest dream. I was praying for like, a 3 or 4 bedroom house that would work out that I could do and I could, maybe help, 8 guys. And now we're talking about, upwards of 30. And, how it's all going to come together, I don't know. God will open a door, but it's like exactly that situation where God's like, boom, here you go. Here's more than you could have even imagined.
Yeah.
And let's see what you do with it. And it's so crazy because I just prayed about it and it, my mind is still blown. I told him, I said, hey, I said, can you leave it unlocked? Because I want to come back tonight and just spend a couple hours, just walking around and trying to formulate a plan of how to do this and, um, you know, see the vision for it. But it's just like out of nowhere, man, out of a random Facebook post that my mom saw, and my mom told me about it. She was like, so and so, go look at his Facebook. He just made this post, and I went and looked at it and sent him a message uh, yesterday, and then talked to him on the phone last night, and drove out and saw it this morning. And it's
Wow.
unbelievable how God works.
It is.
But again, I keep getting sidetracked. What about one true God and our true God? How did you come up with the name? Where did that come from?
Um, no, the name, and I'm sorry, you give such good stories. I have to comment on them, but that coincidence, right? What we often say, the coincidence is God's way of remaining anonymous
Yeah.
because He can't intercede with your free will, and so He has to make it look like, it could be a coincidence. You don't know if it's God, but at some point, like you just know because there's too many things in a row. Like as an example, my main job, we have the our true God as our mission company. We don't take from that. We give. We gave away $240,000 to like hurricane victims and sex traffic victims, and like we just try to give back as much as possible. We reinvest and try to reach more people. And we don't take money from that as a profit standpoint. Um, my main company is real estate. So if you ever need to talk about how to acquire a building like that and
Yeah,
how to make that happen, I've done that a couple times.
definitely, man.
So
Hey, listen,
coincidence,
this,
right?
yeah. Oh, and I'm just for the record, I'm gonna steal that. How did you say it? God's coincidence
Coincidence.
is God's way of being anonymous.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm definitely stealing that. I'm gonna write that down.
Because he has to
Um,
preserve your free will. Like that's the gift. He has to preserve. He can't make it so it's like so obvious that he exists that you don't have a choice.
right. Well, there's no reason for faith if
Even though like the fact that we're here talking across the world, with
right.
some random electric circuits, even though that's happening, that's not enough evidence apparently.
Right.
But you know, anyways. So you said
Hey,
how to come up with a name?